Hello everybody, it's Wyvern here with another bit of Total War, Warhammer 2, Cold Match gameplay. This time around, we are on the fields around Kerk Buftar, playing as the courageous Dawi, defending against the incursion of the Tomb Kings. So, knowing that the Tomb Kings of course tend to bring a lot of monsters, a lot of big nasties, and don't have the best of infantry, I decided to do a sort of artillery heavy build and focus on just keeping away my opponent's big troops, and slowly but surely whittling them down over time with heavy artillery and supporting fire. So for my lord, I did decide to bring Grumbrindle, the White Dwarf, and this is for a few reasons. One, he's of course still very tanky, as most dwarf lords are, with a lot of HP. Even his melee defense at 40 will allow him to sort of tank out against a lot of the lower end Tomb King troops. He does have Grumbrindle has no fear, which is a great little unbreakable buff that you can cast. Foe Seeker for that mobility, and Flash Bomb, which is a great melee attack debuff as well as speed debuff, so it can potentially help me almost root enemy monsters in place, keep them stuck while I am able to chop them down with slayers or shoot them down with cannons or that sort of stuff. Alongside him are two Thanes with the Tormentor's Sword, and these guys of course are once again very tanky, as most dwarfs are wont to be. Okay melee stats, and they can of course lock down enemy troops or debuff them and prevent them from getting on top of my cannons here, and that can be very useful. For my front line, it is a whole bunch of Longbeards. You can see 3 units of them out here screening the cannons a little bit, as well as a unit of Longbeards. So you can see my front line is very wide, not exactly typical of Davi, with usually people try to do defensive geometry or something like that. Rather than that, I simply have a bunch of Longbeards spaced out as much as I can, so that my opponent has a hard time shutting down my cannons. So 4 units of Longbeards, with a pair of miners with blasting charges out on the flanks, a unit of Slayers as well as the Dragonback Slayers behind the cannons, and then a unit of Rangers in the very back, hidden, so that if my opponent tries to land carrying, which of course I was expecting, on my backline, I would be able to gun them down relatively quickly. Obviously this build is very wide, and that is definitely intentional, so that if my opponent manages to say shut down one unit with a big monster, say this cannon, then with the other 2 cannons we'll still be able to whittle him down, and perhaps I can thread my cannon crew out and later bring them back to remount the weapon. For the rest of my opponent's army, definitely a fairly conventional, I think, build, though well, perhaps not that conventionally. Definitely didn't go too heavy on the big monsters. 2 units of carrying out on the flanks, ready to shut down my arty. And in the center, he does have Arkan the Black as his lord, coming with the usual Fate of Buna Spirit Leech, Tomb Blade of Arkan. Looking through, the Liber Mortis, though I do believe there is no, he doesn't have the ability that gives him additional Winds of Magic, or greater Winds of Magic regeneration, so definitely a little bit of a, I think, mistake there, since that's a very useful ability. He does have a single contingent of Screaming Skull Catapults. These guys are not very good. I personally would never recommend using them. Fairly short-ranged, very bad splash, rather poor accuracy. They do cause a morale debuff, but I do believe it's only 6, or sorry, not 6, I do believe it's only 8. So personally, I'm not a big fan of the Screaming Skull Catapults, but nonetheless, we'll see how they perform. For his front line, my opponent has a mix of Ushapti, as well as Tomb Guard, Nehekarn Warriors, the Kepra Guard in the center, and you can see more Ushapti on the flank, backed by 2 units of Ushapti Great Bows. So definitely quite a bit of AP, as well as the ability to sort of chew through my elite infantry. You can see over there the Screaming Skull Catapult doing a little damage to my cannon. My Rangers do tee off here on the carrion. But the Longbeards will be pretty tanky against the Kepra Guard even, and the Nehekarn Warriors. They'll be able to outtrade them easily due to their very high melee defense and reasonable melee offense stats. So you can see my opponent is trying to hit me here with the catapults, doing a little bit of damage to the crew, but the cannon is teeing off and trading shots here with the Ushapti, and they are managing to really take them down a peg here. You can see they're down to 7 models already because of the crossfire coming in from the 3 units of cannons. In the meantime, my opponent is definitely getting a little greedy here, going in with the carrion, simply flying over my Rangers, desperately trying to shut down these cannons, because of course they are late, putting a number on his troops. He's going to dive here, but my Slayers will be on the case, and the Slayers, despite not being the Slayers are, and of course you can see the Rangers immediately start firing, but Slayers, despite not being anti-infantry or anti-small unit, Slayers have very high melee attack, especially Dragonback Slayers with a 50 melee attack, and they will be able to annihilate the carrion in short order. Similarly, Vanilla Slayers have 38 melee attack, which is more than enough against the relatively high melee defense of 46 here. There's just a lot of them. The carrion are fairly large, so you can surround them, and you definitely improve your chance of hitting that way. Over here, I definitely should have been a little more on top of pulling my crews off, so I'm going to suffer a little bit here as my crews rout. I should have pulled them off a little sooner, but nonetheless, the crew will survive and be able to come back and remount the guns. In the meantime, you can see Screaming Skull Catapult trying to tee off and damage the cannon. I'm keeping my Thanes in the back, just hidden in reserve. Over here, the carrion are getting destroyed. You can see the cannon crew here doing their very best with the Rangers providing support, trying to take down this carrion. Somewhere over here, I did hear Fate of Buna going off on these Longbeards. The Longbeards, of course, just are very stout warriors, and they're sticking in there to the bitter end, despite Liber Noctis and all that. And of course, Grumbrindle is in here, landing smack down some fools. In the meantime, you can see these Ushabti are breaking through as well, going for my back line. I think this was a little bit of a mistake on my opponent's part. Trying to use the Ushabti to shut down the back line. You can see I immediately run with the cannon, juking them out, and letting the Rangers take the blow here. And the Dragonback Slayers are immediately on the case, and they're going to be able to lay a smackdown on these poor Ushabti, as is the Thane. And of course, you can see the cannon is coming back online with all 3 guns available, and is going to be able to start wreaking havoc on these Ushabti, who are now down to 3 models, while these Ushabti over here are still on their 9. But the cannon's definitely trading fire pretty effectively. Over here, the Ushabti are pulling back, realizing the Slayers are very much on the case. You can see the cannon here trying to take down the Ushabti. I'm not sure if you're tying down my opponent. Obviously, the cannons, despite not doing the best performance, perhaps not the best performance, are doing a very good job just tying down my opponent's fire from all sorts of units, from his Ushabti great bows, from his artillery pieces. And so realistically right now, they're definitely paying for themselves. Here on the front line, you can see the Grumbrindle is getting Spirit Leeched. He is trading blows with Ark in the Black, and he should win this pretty decisively, but he's getting interfered with by all these Hecaran warriors and units like that. In the meantime, the Longbeards just sticking through. Slide out with my foes. Over here, the Longbeards, of course, are going to beat the Tomb Guard relatively handily. The cannons are taking down the Ushabti Great Bows, who are down to just a handful of models now, 4, and I do believe another 4 over here, now down to 2. Over here, the Hecaran warriors are pushing through, but rather than engaging them, I'm simply going to allow the Thane to start slaying the smackdown while the Rangers whittle them down, and just going to pull the cannon crew away. No reason for them to be in danger. They are a little faster. They can outrun them, so definitely decent. Over here, the Longbeards are routing, but they will rally. Of course, they're not 35 models. They're still potent force over here. A little bit of a mistake letting these Slayers and Miners blasting charges sit around without helping. Though you can see the Tomb Guard is slowly but surely being chipped away at by the Longbeards, who are just a much better troop choice. And you can see these guys have already beaten some other units previously. They're up to 53 kills, so it's definitely not just been the Tomb Guard they've been beaten down. Over here, the Kepra Guard is still tanking out, and you can see these Longbeards definitely not having the best time because they're so surrounded and being encircled. Another Spirit Leech going down, poor Grumbrindle, but one of those Ushabti is down to artillery fire, and the other one is not long for this world. As the Dragonback Slayers are pushing through, they're going to make a rout, and then I'll be able to collapse here on the back of my opponent's troops. So a bit of an interesting tidbit here. Grumbrindle, you can see, is going to be smashing Ark in the Black here. He does have Foe Seeker just to get that extra vigor, but knowing that I can't chase down the Ushabti, I'm actually going to cast the Flash Bomb here on the Kepra Guard, knowing that the Flash Bomb, I do have Grumbrindle knows no fear here, and I do cast Flash Bomb, which is minus 27 melee defense. That is going to make these Kepra Guard incredibly vulnerable to the Dragonback Slayers, who immediately are going to lay a smackdown. Now, Dragonback Slayers are not ideal for killing squishy targets, but they do a lot of damage per hit. They do have that 48 weapon strength. They do have some built-in physical resistance, so they're actually going to chew through. And of course, they do actually have magical resistance. So even against Kepra Guard, they're pretty tanky. They've got 25% magic resistance against them, and so they're just going to be tearing them to shreds here as they're weakened by the Flash Bomb. Anytime Longbeards into pits holding strong, you can see the Ushabti are getting whittled down, hit by a Tormentor Sword, and chipped away at rather quickly. Over here, the Miners with the Longbeards are just doing a tremendous job tying down Tomb Guard and Hecaran warriors. Miners obviously not the best of choices once they're out of blasting charges, but they can tie my opponent down here. Rangers coming back online, sniping away at my opponent's infantry, and even this tattered unit of Longbeards is making a reappearance. Over here, the cannon's still doing a great job just chipping away. The last cannon, of course, did get taken offline. I do believe he finally routed after 4 models, but far too late for my opponent, who is losing these Ushabti Great Bows in the back. The Screaming Skull Catapult getting taken offline by that murderous artillery fire. And it simply hasn't really gotten much done. It really hasn't paid for itself this game. The cannon is going to land a nasty few shots here, taking off some crew, but not quite shutting down any guns just yet. And we are going to fast forward things. You can see it just got pushed back the Kepra Guard here, pushing after the Arkan, who's trying to flee. Artillery piece obviously coming offline, and that is going to be it for the Tomb Kings. So, definitely I think there were some issues with my composition. Obviously it was very dependent on the cannons. I think while I do think cannons are strong, the cannons do struggle a little bit against monstrous infantry because they don't really get maximum value against them unless your opponent for whatever reason condenses them. But if they're in a straight line, you only really get 1 hit per model, and so they don't quite get maximum value. They're obviously not killing models in a single shot, so the Ushabti were definitely resisting relatively well. At the same time, because the cannons were such an appealing target for my opponent, they really baited his troops out of position. They got his carrion killed. They got the and despite that, they didn't really go offline ever. Got his Ushabti killed. They dealt with his Ushabti Great Bows and tied down their focus for a very long time. They dealt with the Screaming Skull Catapult, or they tied it down and wasted its shots for a long time. So that was definitely a good job from the cannons. Perhaps they weren't the ideal choice. I'm not entirely sure what I would have done differently here, besides obviously just dropping the cannons in favor of some Thunders. Maybe drop a cannon and a Ranger for 2 Thunders, something like that. But nonetheless, they did a pretty good job. You can see the Longbeard front line held out very well. Of course, they are much better than the Hecaran warriors, and definitely a tad better, I think, than Tomb Guard in just a straight-up exchange. They don't have quite the same quality of shields. and I don't think their offensive stats are anywhere near as good, but they're still very, very tanky, and they can definitely trade blow for blow with the Tomb Guard. The Kepler Guard itself also didn't do the greatest of jobs tearing through them, because they are still very tanky. They do have that built-in magic resist because they are dwarves and good armor at 100, so definitely still trading well. The miners with blasting charges, not great, once again, but they're miners with blasting charges. They got a few volleys off, that's all that mattered. The Slayer's doing a great job shutting down the monsters. Stain's doing a good job, and Ingram Brindle raking in a few kills. For my opponent, the Prophet here, I do think this is a bit of an interesting build, trying to overwhelm your Dawi opponent with a bunch of infantry. I think that what my opponent should have done is perhaps dropped a unit or even two of the Necron Warriors, tried to get a little bit more light cavalry in there. Definitely drop the Screaming Skull Catapult. Just try to get a little more mobile units in there just to tie down the cannons, waste the ammo, prevent them from doing too much, and then use the Ushabti on top of his infantry so they could really get max value. Because when Ushabti get bogged down even by a sort of mediocre unit like, say, Longbeards or Miners even, or much less Slayers, when they get bogged down like that and they get surrounded, they get beaten down incredibly quickly. They get taken to Pound Town very, very fast. And so you really want to protect them as best you can, and so it's usually good to park them on top of infantry, as in for example, in my monster tutorial I discussed that. And so my opponent not being able to do that, or not really doing that because he was so desperate to shut down my artillery, definitely was a bit of a problem here. Nonetheless, great game to my opponent here. I do hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you did, be sure to leave a like and subscribe down below. If you have any comments, criticism, any questions about the game or anything like that, be sure to share them and I'll respond as soon as I can. As usual, guys, I do appreciate you all for watching, and I will see you all in the next one. Bye for now.